Good evening. Good evening. Welcome. Please type in the chat where you're joining from today and how many people are watching with you. And if you are able and willing, can you also put in the native land which you occupy? It'd be great to acknowledge that as well. So again, please type in the chat where you're joining from today, how many people are with you, and the native land which you occupy. It'll be really great to see your, you guys fill the room. I see Liz. Liz has been in other screenings and she knows how to check in. So Liz is here from Westchester, just her. Great. Any others? Let's hear from you. Where are you coming in from? How many are with you? And the native lands which you occupy, if you know. I'm going to type it in the chat too. Christine, thank you so much for joining us from Jefferson Park. Jordan in Chicago. Thanks, Jordan. Glad to see you. Who else? I love to just see your voice in the chat. Also helps our panelists and folks who are about to be in conversation with you later to know who's here. Great. Mark from Oak Park, Josh in Downers Grove, Mac in Chicago on Potawatomi land. Thank you, Mac. Great. And if you guys don't know, the native land which you occupy, you can also check on the website. You don't have to do it now, but just as a point of interest, Native Land Digital. If you just look at Native Land and Digital, it's the app. Anybody else want to check in here? Great. We've got Garen from the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nations. Great. Okay, let's keep that going, and I will move us along. But yes, please keep checking in. I'm Anna Garcia Doyle, the Executive Director of One Earth Collective, which produces the One Earth Film Festival. Welcome to this festival screening event. We hope it's going to provide us all with rich opportunities for learning and a brave and safe space for important conversations, as well as a way to move from inspiration to action. I just want to take a second to acknowledge our sponsors and partners. We could not do this work without your support, so thank you to WBEZ Chicago and Vocalo. Another quick note, if your circumstances allow, please donate to support One Earth's nonprofit year-round screening events, youth programs, and more at oneearthfilmfest.org.
We gratefully welcome you to One Earth's 11th festival season, and we invite you to join us in turning the tide on our climate crisis. The festival uses the power of film to create a sea change on topics of environment and those intersected with environment, like racial, social, and economic justice. This year, we've adapted a hybrid format where all screenings are virtual, with some accompanying in-person events taking place in the Chicago area. Whether live or virtual, we remain committed to our unique model of gathering and community to raise awareness of the issues, engage in dialogue, and be inspired to act. A powerful image and call to collective action in light of this year's festival theme, Turn the Tide, are the words of Japanese writer Ryanosuke Satoru. Individually, we are one drop. Together, we are an ocean. Our event will take place in 4 parts. Soon, we'll introduce you to some folks who will help us have a rich discussion after the film. Then, we'll watch the film together. After the film, we'll unpack its themes in a facilitated dialogue with our panelists. Please use the chat to share your thoughts, ideas, or questions. We'll end by sharing concrete actions you can take to be part of the solution. These suggested actions come from our panelists and action partners. I'd now like to make a few brief acknowledgments. The first is that, as we reframe narratives around justice, environment, and equitable solutions to our climate crisis, we acknowledge the many filmmakers, film subjects, facilitators, and panelists joining this and other fest events. Thank you. Your wisdom and experiences help us spark and sustain actions for the protection of our One Earth and for the just treatment of its resources and its people. The second acknowledgement is that One Earth Collective is based in Chicago, the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, and home to many other tribes, including today, peoples from over 100 tribal nations. Despite this, there are currently no federally recognized tribes in Illinois, due in part to colonization, relocation, and genocide. One Earth sustains its commitment to presenting films that center Indigenous stories and voices. We believe that beyond acknowledging the native lands we each occupy, we must lift up Indigenous voices and support the work of First Nations groups. If you're in the Chicago area, please support the important work being done by the American Indian Center Chicago, the Chicago American Indian Community Collaborative, Chi Nations Youth Council, and others. And watch for the Field Museum exhibition Native Truths, Our Voices, Our Stories, co-curated with collaborators from more than 100 tribes, opening this May. A third acknowledgement is that shared agreements can help keep our conversations safe and respectful. Please observe the following agreements when participating. Put aside your preconceptions, acknowledge your privilege, internalize what you've learned, approach the conversation with respect, engage your active listening, use I statements, and get comfortable with your own story. One last thing before we meet our facilitator and program participants. If you're active on social media, tell people that this is happening. Amplify these voices and be a part of the community we're building here together. The hashtags for the festival are hashtag OEFF 2022 and hashtag Turn the Tide. And now I'd like to turn it over to our facilitator to introduce themselves, the panelists, and our film.
Good afternoon, good evening, from wherever you're dialing in from. My name is Doug Dixon, and I'm talking to you this evening from Lansing, Michigan. I am a longtime volunteer with the One Earth Film Festival. I think I've been associated with the Film Fest since it was just a mote in God's eye 10 years ago in Oak Park. But I'm so pleased to be with you this evening. The reason I'm attracted to the One Earth Film Festival is because I love movies. And frequently, when I walk out of movies, I haven't had time or the inclination to reflect on what I think, what I felt, or really how it impacts me. But the One Earth Film Festival is somewhat different. The purpose of our screening this evening is to really provoke a rich dialogue based on what we see and feel, based on the movie we're going to watch, Bring Your Own Brigade. So we look forward to having you participate in the discussion after the movie, and maybe even lead to some actions that we can take that are triggered by emotions and feelings and thoughts that we've had from the discussion and watching the movie. Before we jump into the movie, I would like to briefly introduce Julian Cotherly, who is the producer of Bring Your Own Brigade. Julian, please wave to the crew. Thank you, Julian. So, give you a brief introduction. I could read the paragraph, but I will spare you the my reading style. But Bring Your Own Brigade, really fascinating, evocative movie that focuses on a couple of communities in California that were affected by the wildfires in 2018. The communities of Paradise, California, and the Malibu, very different economic and cultural communities, but both affected by both natural and not so natural climate change effects. So what we're going to focus on is how these catastrophes affected the people, how they're attempting to recover, and what we can do to maybe mitigate the effects of the causes of these problems. So without further ado, please stay tuned for the movie. Stay tuned after the movie. It's 127 minutes long for a rich discussion with Julian and maybe a little bit of time for Q&A and talking about how we can engage ourselves to turn the tide. So without further ado, Bring Your Own Brigade. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us and watching the movie, and thank you for sticking around for the post-film discussion. As we mentioned before the movie, the purpose of the One Earth Film Festival is to stimulate ideas that can hopefully lead for action. So before we jump in, please type into the chat box, what are some of the scenes, people, or lines that stood out in the film as you watched it? What are some of the scenes, people, or lines in the film? Please type into your chat box. You know what is peculiar? What struck me early in the movie was one of the guys was talking about how they were evacuating. I think he was in Paradise, and two men mentioned that what they got in 30 seconds was picked up their guns. And one of them got his gun, but he didn't have any ammunition. It's like, that's a strange, strange thing to grab. Maybe pictures, pets, get your guns with no ammo. Nothing stuck out? Oh, okay. When they stood over their burned homes and said, life is good. That takes tremendous grounding to feel that. What stood out for you? What, at the end of the movie, what kind of sticks in your mind? Had a statement from Jordan. How do we get Americans to think collectively? It's all about me and my freedom. Yeah, that does. I think there's a quote in the movie about self-immolation over compromising your individual liberty. It's pretty scary. Pretty scary. Anything else stick out for you? All of the videos, yeah, fire videos are pretty intense. You know, if I think the people that pick these films, they pick them to try to create emotion, and fire creates a big emotion. Okay, thank you. I'll stop moving my arms. Oh, my house burned down. Now I see the moon better. See, that's pretty deep. That is pretty deep. Any other thoughts that pop up to people? Oh, I don't know that I still understood. I think Leola and Jeff mentioned that the need for small fires to avoid big fires. And I always thought all fires were the enemy. The residents of Paradise are unable to make changes. Yeah, that's kind of, it seems to be a common problem in our fight for restoring the earth. We don't want to change anything. We want other people to change it. The failure to pass the 5-foot barrier, is pretty scary. Ooh, somebody, the same thing, Donna remembered, that stuck in my mind. I thought some of the First Nations people, some of the scenes toward the end and the rituals of the folks that have been on this land for 10,000 years seemed to be some consideration. Oh, Jennifer was affected by the embers. Yeah, that's kind of scary. Yeah, that was pretty neat. Pretty neat. Well, I'll tell you what. As I think you guys heard before we screened the movie, we had planned for the director of the movie, Lucy Walker, to join us for a discussion this evening. She is on location in Mexico, probably doing another great documentary or beginning a documentary, and is having Wi-Fi and communication issues, so she was not able to join us this evening. However, we were able to get lucky and have her producer join us this evening, but she was able to record a brief welcome, greeting, context for the movie that she would like to share with us. And if we could take a minute to listen to Lucy's comments for us, let's do that now.
Hi, thank you so much for watching Bring Your Own Brigade. We made the film to be watched, and you just watched it, and that's really makes me happy, because I think, as I hope you might agree by now, it's really important. I'm so sorry I can't be there. I'm having lots of connectivity problems. I'm on location. And what's really nice, though, is that I think that producers are a huge part of the team that no one ever acknowledges enough. And so you're going to get to meet the secret, or not so secret, but shouldn't be secret at all, the absolutely amazing producer, Julian, who absolutely made this film with me and doesn't get nearly enough credit, because producers don't. So you'll meet him, and he knows all the answers, and I'm really, really grateful to this amazing festival. Turning the tide on climate change couldn't be top, is the top of my list of things to do. And this festival is really doing it. And as a you, by watching and spreading the word and talking, and let's all help each other turn the tide. So over to you, Julian, and thanks so much to everyone at the festival, especially for bearing with me because it's been tricky. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm so glad she was able to take a few minutes to join us, if asynchronously, to share her greetings for us. But without further ado, our guest presenter today is Julian Cawthorley. Julian is a producer who worked with Lucy on Bring Your Own Brigade. I would read his bio, but that would take us the entire duration of the chat, so that's probably not appropriate. But just a few highlights. He's a producer. Been at this for quite a while. He's produced films that have been shown at Sundance, South by Southwest, Berlin, One Earth Film Festival, you name it. If it's a fest of a documentary, he's probably got a footprint on it. He runs Good and Proper Productions and worked with Lucy on this film. What else do I need to say? Oh, he's a member of the Academy and actually teaches. He's an adjunct professor of film production, I think, at USC. So without further ado, let Julian say a few words for himself.
Thank you, Doug. Really appreciate all those kind words. Nice to meet you all. I'm Julian. I'm one of the producers on the film. I'm speaking to you from Los Angeles, and I'm on Tongva land. And I'm excited to get into a discussion with you, Doug, and answer any questions from the chat. And I've been really interested in reading what everyone's been posting already about moments that are important and stuck with them. And it's a film that obviously lives in a lot of tragedy. Yet I think we believe there is some hope out there, and I think screening the film and making the film is a part of that journey to create more conversation, discussion, and hopefully to a better future.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. We agree. We hope that that is the outcome of this documentary. Very powerful and moving topic. I've not seen very many of your previous documentaries, but I was curious. Before the audience starts firing questions at you, what attracted you to work with Lucy on Bring Your Own Brigade?
Great question. So Lucy and I have worked together actually for almost 10 years now on different films. And so we started with a film in 2011 called The Crash Reel. And we've made a number of long form, short form, and doc series since then. And so this film specifically, we both live in Los Angeles. I live on the east side of Los Angeles, and she lives on the coast of Venice in Los Angeles. And having been here, I've been in Los Angeles for 20 years now. And fires which come through all around us in Southern California. And in 2017, there was a very big fire called the Thomas Fire that came through Southern California, Ojai, Santa Barbara, that whole area. And when that was happening, we knew a number of people whose homes were affected by the fire, by the Thomas Fire. And that began the idea of, well, how do we learn about what's going on, and what do we, how can we know what to do? And there hadn't been a feature-length doc in this scope made about wildfires crisis that was going on, and so that began the journey of making a film. And we started by making a short documentary that was just going to be on the Thomas Fire. But whilst making that short documentary, the two fires that happened on the same day in 2018 and in Paradise and in Malibu happened, and we had made friends with the Montecito Fire Department, which are just outside Santa Barbara, and so they were sent down to go fight the Malibu fire. And so we literally went in with them, and after 10 straight days of filming in Malibu and then also in Paradise, it was clear that we had so much material that it was no longer a short film, short documentary, but it was going to be a feature-length one. And then it was another year of filming before we got around to be able to edit and kind of put the film that we have together that you all seen.
Very good. I am curious the transition from a short form to a long form, the transition from a topic perhaps narrow, a 2017 local fire, to California is burning. How did the vision of the objective of the documentary change? I mean, was there a story that presented itself that you didn't think of in the beginning?
Interestingly, essentially not really. So I think the idea with the short documentary was to understand in the Thomas Fire specifically, what had gone on there, why it had happened, what could we do differently, and how could things be better. And essentially that's the same thing we took into it's just a larger scope with the two fires happening at two different parts of California, north and south, and also two different types of places, socioeconomically different. Their politics are different. Everything is very different between Paradise and Malibu, and it became a really interesting contrast and juxtaposition to see these very different places, but yet the problem was the same, and the challenges were the same.
Totally different communities, but affected in identical ways. Maybe they don't have the private fire department available in Paradise that they might have for some homes in Malibu. One of the questions that struck me, I'm a Midwesterner, born and raised, live pretty much adjacent to the Great Lakes. And in watching the movie, I'm moved by the trauma. I'm moved by the tragedy. I'm moved by the destruction. But it feels somewhat remote. I don't think I'm close to a wilderness, urban intersection area. Can you talk about how climate change and wildfires affect us in the East Coast and Midwest, or how we can affect climate change if we're not living in the path of it?
Well, not sure about the Midwest exactly, but when there were last summer big fires up in the Pacific Northwest and in Colorado, the smoke reached all the way to New York City, on the East Coast.
Right.
So the after effects of the fire, and so air quality, that's something that will affect everybody, as the wind and the fire and the ash move from coast to coast, and it's pretty powerful. If it's a big fire happening even in Pacific Northwest, how in Los Angeles we can be affected in terms of air quality, and right now, Pacific Northwest, California, on the West Coast is definitely on fire every year. But Colorado is last year had really tragic fires happening there too. And I think you're seeing with climate change that the areas where that could be affected by wildfires are changing. It used to be Southern California that was most affected by wildfires, and not Northern California. But the climate is creeping up, and it's going all the way up to Seattle. So it could go anywhere in theory. I think as climate change is affecting the weather systems, and we're getting hotter and drier, it could affect other places too.
Very good. I agree. Did you personally have much experience, or did you have any bad experiences in living through fire season in Los Angeles past couple of years?
Personally, I would say no, especially if you compare to the people who are living directly in the fire zones, who have to evacuate and leave, and their houses may be burning down. I've definitely, in the last 5 years, every summer there are many weeks where the air quality is just so bad that you're staying at home. I think many people in 2020, what was, tragic is that, we spent obviously a lot of time at home because of the pandemic, indoors, not going out at the beginning of the pandemic. And then when people were ready to start moving out again and start doing things, the fires started to happen. And so the smoke and the air quality was so bad that you actually had to stay back indoors. And I think that's, a real, part of what I experienced because I live on the east side of Los Angeles, which isn't in the fire-prone areas. And I think what we learned and what is partly in the film, and it could be its own film itself, is where housing is being built is a big part of our fire problem. It's not, fire is always going to happen. And many of our experts and characters in the film, like Zeke and Steve Pine, they talk about how, places like Paradise are built in fire areas. Climate change does affect it, but it was going to burn regardless because of other reasons. And so a lot of our housing that's built in this wildland urban interface, the WUI, that's mentioned in the film, this area, that's problematic. And then also you have places like Malibu and the many other places where when you have the resources or the desire to build a home in a very remote place, you are putting yourself in potential fire danger that then the fire department has to come and help you with. So who bears the cost and the burden of that rescue? Like, is it on the homeowner? Like, should the homeowner take responsibility? Because I think, we live in a country and a world where I think you should have the choice to build your home where you want to build it. But what is the responsibility if you do build it in a place that is fire prone? And how should you build your home?
Very good. That is a point of tension that came up quite a bit in the movie. As a matter of fact, I was somewhat surprised, and I guess David and Julie were somewhat surprised. And I'm wondering, were you surprised with the resistance of people, specifically in the Malibu area, to implement new building codes after they've recently experienced such severe loss?
Yes and no, I think is the answer. Yes, I am surprised that it was so unanimous. But at the same time, no, because I think, the truth is, and it's the same with climate change as a whole, is we know the solutions and we know the problem. We are choosing not to. I think the same way that people used to smoke. They knew the ramifications of that, but you're choosing to do that anyway because it's something that you are taking on the risk. But I think the difference between something that's as personal as smoking or something like that, it affects you personally. Whereas if your home burns and if you don't safeguard your home, then your neighbors can also be affected by it. And I think there are things where we live in a community where there should be a way for the community to come together to find a way forward that helps everybody. And so I think, we see it with the pandemic, we see it with climate change, we see it with many things. I think we even see it right now with the war between Russia and Ukraine. I think there is a way out, but people are not choosing that way out. And I think that's our challenge as a human race, is to collectively do the better thing.
Very well said. Very, very well said. I can't speak for the audience, but I was very moved, not in a good way, by the scenes in the movie. And it, as part of the design, it had me wondering, what can I do? What should I do? But what struck me, especially thinking about the late scenes in the movie where people were resistant to change things, is did you guys go do a screening for people in Paradise and Malibu? I mean, have they seen this movie? And what was their reaction?
Yeah, the film originally premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2021. Which was during the height of pandemic time. So we did provide. So normally we would invite people to go to the premiere and be a part of that. We weren't able to do that because the festival was a virtual festival. It wasn't an in-person one. But we did provide links to everybody who was part of the film so they could see the film. And then the film was released theatrically in August of 2021. And it was in a few theaters in and around Paradise area. So the community there got to see it. we haven't been able to go specifically to Paradise or to like host a screening in Paradise itself, because it just hasn't been that opportunity. We did do a screening in Malibu around November of last year, and that was really interesting to play the film for the community there. And I know from people who were in Paradise area who watched the film when it was released, it was very powerful. I think there is there's a level of reliving the trauma of what they went through. In the first 35 minutes of the movie, it's reliving something that was very tragic for that community. And so I do know some people were not ready to watch that again. And so hopefully in time they may or they may not do. And that's totally up to them. I think this is a really tragic thing and people need to deal with it in the way that makes sense for them in order to watch it. But I think bringing the film to the communities is a really powerful thing, and bringing the film to other communities like this community at the One Earth Film Festival is really important, because I think it's about engaging, having a dialogue. And I think you've all mentioned the council scenes and the voting scenes, and I think in theory you would think that those must be the most boring things to be at and to film, and why would anyone want to show like a council meeting that you probably wouldn't even want to go to? But it's some of the most dramatic and riveting stuff, because it really, for Lucy and I and the team, it really was a place where you saw how humans, how we all as a people function. It really was a very powerful way of seeing how difficult it is to make change, because there was definitely desire, and Lucy mentions a tiny bit in the film, but the reality is most of the council members who were sitting at on stage, they wanted to change. Like prior to the council meeting, they wanted these things to pass, like the 5-foot barrier, but the public was pushing back on them so strongly that they had to, as servants of the public, kind of go with what everyone wanted, which was tragic.
Agreed. It was tragic. And I'm not a producer. I'm not a social scientist by education, but I would imagine that if the people of Malibu were to watch the city council scenes again, I think Lucy had a throwaway line that if this is how change occurs, we're screwed. They might change their ways. On the subject of changing ways, looking at your website and your bio, I think you have a quote about this movie that says that you hope this film saves lives. What specifically do you hope that folks take away after watching this film that can save lives?
There's a very practical thing. This 5-foot barrier, all the experts have been telling us that is really important. That's a very simple thing that people who live in fire-prone areas could do that could make a difference. And I know that the fire chief in Paradise, the council members, the experts who were there advising them, they all wanted something as simple as that to be taken on board. It's no additional cost to the residents to make this change, because there were other ideas of putting fire extinguishers and stuff like that in the house that obviously there's a cost related to that, but this was like a no cost thing. So I think that's really important. I mean, look, the save life thing is obviously it's a great target. I think the reality is, I think with the film and some of the comments sort of, I think, make sense to me, is just love for people to look around them, look around at the nature around them and be connected to that. Because I do believe that the more connected we all individually can be with nature and listen to nature, then we will forge a path forward that's in the right way. And I think you see from Don and Trina and all the indigenous communities that are in the film and who are putting across their wisdom that they've known for many, 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 many years. This is not new information. They've known this for a long time. And, if we would sit down and listen to them instead of thinking that we know better, that would be a great step forward, because I think there is a lot of knowledge that already exists around us that could make a difference.
One of the themes that bounced around in my mind, I don't know if it bounced around in anyone else's, is a theme about community. Comes up quite a bit in the movie, comes up in your language a good deal. One of the chat questions, I think, relates to the concept of community. And if I could paraphrase the chat question, please yell at me if I don't get it right. The time and place of this event and filming is somewhat removed. It's been a couple of years since those events. You are close, but not right there. Are you aware of any changes in the community of Paradise or the community of Malibu that you can point to and say, that fire catalyzed these changes that might make a difference next time? Do you see anything like that?
Yeah, I have to say I don't know enough to be able to say yes or no. There is one of the characters in the film, his name is Zeke Lunder, and he, if you Google him, he has a website called The Lookout. And he's a fire ecologist. He's a great resource of information and knowledge. He lives in the Paradise area. He did live there and still lives in that area. There was a very big fire last summer. It didn't reach Paradise proper, but it came to the burn scars of the campfire. And a lot of people were evacuated. And it was during the time of when the movie was being released. And so I think, the communities are still dealing with just ongoing fire issues there. I think the challenges are, you want to rebuild because you want to be living in your town and your place where you grew up, where you have roots, and it's very difficult to leave from that, or it's very difficult to wait. And so I think it's the same thing with Malibu. It's just this ongoing cycle of just, okay, it's burned down, let's just build again, and let's keep going. There really isn't. No one has the ability to take time to spend 2 or 3 years figuring out what are the different codes that could make the buildings better. Where should they build? Should they build here? Should they not build here? They're driven by I want to be back in my home, and it's completely reasonable. I think for anybody who has a roof over their head, you understand that's really important. If you don't have a roof on your head, I think that's just your goal, is you want to get there. And so I think the problem with systemic change is you can't really do that. And this might seem like an odd parallel, but I think if you look at how our country, how America, I'm not American, so I can't say our country, but how America deals with race over the many decades. It continues. The same system keeps going, and it came to a time during the pandemic when something like the Black Lives Matter movement really picked up in a big way. There were people who were so fed up with what was going on that they're like, you know what, I can't keep going with the status quo. We need to do something different. And I think the same thing needs to happen here. And I think the tragedy with climate change, and I don't want to see more down, is that, we keep going, we keep continuing to live our lives. We're not making huge changes that potentially, need to be made in order for us to sort of safeguard the planet and our sort of, generations in the future. And I think it's sort of what will it take for everybody to come together and make a sort of big change, big systemic change.
I wish I had that answer.
But hopefully, what you are doing with this film festival and with, people watching films is that emotional stories can be a platform for conversation. And that the more that this can happen, I think the more opportunity and more chance, real dialogue and real possibilities happens. And I think it's about bringing everybody together that are on opposite sides, but have a common problem and don't have to sort of argue about whose politics is right or wrong. It's just, how do we live together and how do we build a better future?
I got to pause on that one because I frequently get trapped into those. Oh, you got to see it my way so we can solve a shared problem. And that doesn't help me get there. I don't know if you can speak to this or not. This may be against the rules of documentary production. But were there any scenes or major segments of the, let's say, first draft of this movie that did not make the cut? And can you talk about what those were?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that didn't make a movie, and it's the same with every movie that you make. I think trying to think of a good example. You know, there are many characters in this film. You know, we have many different voices throughout the film, and a number of them had, you know, very rounded and beautiful stories. There's one guy that he lived in Malibu. His name is Thor. You see him a few times in the film. He's the guy that when we're interviewing him, a deer appears in his background. There's sort of a moment. So that guy. So, you know, he has a fascinating story. He had suffered a traumatic brain injury, didn't know how it happened, and he was sort of picked up on the road in the Malibu area. And, you know, he has this idea of like, well, because he'd lost his memory, the things that he had in his home, the tangible, tactile things, those are the things that helped him remember his past, and all that stuff burned away. What's crazy, his story is he was staying in the guest house of someone's much bigger home, and he was working there and living in the guest house when the fire came, and he helped the owner move out and like save a lot of the stuff, horses, you know, home, you know, belongings and stuff like that. Drove stuff out. You know, he was putting himself at risk, and you know, very sadly, I can sort of see a little bit why, but the homeowner's house burnt and didn't exist anymore after the Malibu fire. But the other house that Thor lived in was left standing. But the homeowner needed a place to live, so they kicked Thor out. And so Thor in the movie talks about living in his truck, and he's, you know, it's just, you know, the tragedy, you know, there's just so many levels, and he was not like, you know, a fancy rich person that lived in Malibu. And we had other stories too in Malibu of people who, you know, maybe their families had money before and they have a great house in Malibu, but they don't have any money anymore. The house is where all the value is. So once the house burns, you know, what do? And you saw the firefighter family that tried to save the house. And that was because for them, you know, their father is just a firefighter. He's not a fancy, but the house was from the family, and they needed to save that house, because if they lost that house, that is all, you know, all their belongings, you know, a part of that home. So yeah, many things that we weren't able to include. You know, the residents in Paradise and in Malibu, very generous with their time with us and very open about their stories, about what they went through. But we just, you know, the film is already 2 hours. You know, we could have made, you know, 4 hours if we wanted to, but you know, it couldn't be a 4-hour film.
Well, what you put together in 187 minutes was quite moving. So it's somewhat frightening to think that you've got lots of stuff on the cutting room floor that could have been even more provocative. Yes. I'm looking at my watch, and I think we may be coming down to wind up a bit. Are there any more questions in the audience for Julian? Comments or questions? Oh, I've got one. Oh, gosh, this is way too deep. Oh, well, Julian, I'm sorry. I hate to do this to you.
Let's do it.
The film discusses the mental health and PTSD of firefighters. So many people that we saw in the movie were incredibly traumatized. Can you speak about that mental health more? Did you see anything that was like common threads and common recovery techniques?
Yeah, well, I think recovery techniques is difficult. I think the common thread, especially amongst the first responders, are to keep going. And I think that is really, and that's another thing too. We had a lot of conversations with firefighters and first responders where they talked about the challenges of their mental health and what they have to deal with, and that was stuff that we just didn't have room to fit into the film. But I know Lucy and I, very. I think it's really important that, whether it's you're a first responder, a firefighter, a police person, military, we as a society, we have all these people that go out and do these things for us, to save us, to safeguard us, and they take on the burden. Whether you're a nurse or a doctor dealing with someone with COVID, or whether you're a police officer dealing, with whatever tragedy you're dealing with, there is a lot of mental health issues that folks like that have to deal with. And, obviously there are, for the people who've lost homes, that's really tragic too, and there's a lot of issues and sadness about that too. But I do think it's just not spoken enough about how difficult our first responders are dealing with, and it's great that people put up banners of like they are heroes and these are great people, and they appreciate that. The firefighters totally appreciate that, but I think it's there's so much more underneath that they have to deal with. Like the rate of divorce in the firefighting community is very high. Suicide is also high. And so, it is, it's a really, it could be an epidemic, it's a really difficult thing to deal with, where we are pushing the hard things in life upon this group of people to do. And I think, that someone in the movie talks about how, we've been conditioned to think that these fires can be put out, that our lives can be saved, our homes can be saved, that they are heroes and they'll do. And there's only so much they can do ultimately. And this unrealistic expectation, I think, also is difficult for them to handle from a mental health perspective too.
Well, thank you, Julian. And thank you for your answer. And one of the thoughts that you just triggered for me, and I will stop rambling with my thought, I'll share it. When I get exhausted and tired and just don't want to think about refuse, don't want to think about safety, don't want to think about environmental issues, I just want to buy and throw away, I stop to think about what is my impact downstream to the next person that has to deal with this. If I could buy my way out of it, that's nice for me. But what about the fireman? What about the waste person? What about the social worker? What about the policeman? And that helps me connect to community. And that's usually a strong enough reason to do the right thing at this point in time. So thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, appreciate all of you. And look, we can't do everything right tomorrow, but we can do just little steps, and
we can do small things, and it all makes a difference. It does save lives. On the subject of saving lives and taking action, this is the point of our whole gathering today. I want to pivot to our short action discussion. The Amanda Gorman, the poet laureate that read a poem at Joe Biden's inaugural. Mm-hmm. And she wrote a poem called Earthrise. That's one of our favorites. And I will read this to you because it's short enough. There is no rehearsal. The time is now. 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 Earth, pale blue dot, we will fail you not. Let us think about how we will not fail Mother Earth. So as a final question, let's take a few minutes to turn to the topic of action. What can we do? What can I do? Could each of you that's sitting in the audience, listening to the conversation and observe the movie, share some ideas for what actions people can take to be part of the solution? What actions can you take What actions can communities take? What actions can governments take to prevent some of the devastation that we've seen in Bring Your Own Brigade? Please type that into your chat box and I will relay some of them out to trigger other ideas, I hope. So what can we do to improve this situation? Are we getting some? So some of the actions that we heard, I think Julian was a big fan of the 5-foot buffer. That seemed to be pretty popular, even with the residents of Malibu and the trustees, even though they didn't vote on it. What are some of the ideas that you'd like to share with the audience that you think is pretty, I won't say low-hanging fruit, but what are some of the ideas that you might pollinate us with? See. Learn about communities' building codes regarding fire prevention. I like that. I think if you're living anywhere on the border between urban and wilderness, be conscious of that. The tension between development and preservation is pretty strong. Compost everything you possibly can. Stop drinking bottled water unless you bottle it yourself. Build smarter houses.
I love all these. I love all these ideas that are popping up in the chat, and I had two very simple things. I think I want to put up there too. One is to tell people to watch films like Bring Your Own Brigade that are about environmental issues, because I think that stories have a very powerful way to connect people and for people to start to think about things. And then the other thing that I feel like would be fantastic is talk to your neighbor. Just reach out, speak to someone, especially if it's someone I know that has a political sign that's different than yours. Go and talk to them. Like the person that you don't want to talk to, go talk to them. And it doesn't mean you have to tell them you're right or they're right. Just talk to them, say hi.
Just talk to them.
Just build connections.
Thank you. Obviously, that's part of our theme. We are big on community building because we think that that's what happens. One person can get a lot done, but two people can get much more than two things done. The One Earth Film Festival has a book discussion group called All We Can Save. And we will circulate the ability to connect with that discussion group when we send out the recording of the proceedings from today. So in the coming days, you'll see not only the wrapper around the movie, but some of the take action points that we've talked about and presented. I can't even read them all, but I think you can read them better. A final reflection. So I can't see that slide. Let me see if I can see that slide. Sorry, guys. Nope, still can't read it. Can't take my glasses off. Sorry. Please feel free to read those. Those are great ideas, and we'll send them to you in an email in a couple of days. But as we close out, I certainly hope that you feel affected, as strongly attracted to the work that we're doing at the One Earth Collective and One Earth Film Festival in our 11th year of production. Our theme this year is Turning the Tide, and I'm glad that you joined us to turn the tide. We at least take the first step in turning the tide. Is there anything that, if you've got some ideas that you'd like to bang in the chat to share with us on the way you are ready to turn the tide, please share them at this time. Turning the tide. Turning the tide. I think I'll take Julian's note and have more conversations with people, even the ones that I know don't believe in climate change, because that's how we build community. That's what we need. Thank you very much. So to learn more about Julian's work, please feel free to check out his website, Good and Proper. Lucy Walker will probably have another movie coming out next year. Please pay attention to her. All of her movies are themed around mostly environmental and other social justice issues. We need more allies with eyeballs and mouths sharing the word. Please feel free to tweet or anything else you young people do on social media about this event. The One Earth Film Festival will continue for another 9 days, I believe, and we've got several more compelling films. So please let us know. If you found great value in today's screening and conversation, please feel free to donate to the One Earth Film Festival and join us several days during the week and again next weekend. And last but not least, it is 9:30, 9:31. I'm 1 minute over. I'll say it really, really fast. Thank you all, Earth brothers and sisters, for joining us in turning the tide to protect our mother. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, all the staff behind the scenes at One Earth Film Festival. Blessings, and we'll see you around. Be well. Namaste.